Southern Ohio's rural counties are perfect for outdoor recreation. But the calm of this quiet community was shattered in 1989 when a sniper gunned down an outdoorsman without reason. It was only the first in a string of random, terrifying murders. Hiding in the distance behind a high-powered rifle, a madman was hunting humans along Ohio's county roads.
Starting in the spring of 1989, a madman prowled the woods and fields of rural Ohio. He was a hunter. A high-powered rifle was his weapon of choice. Joggers and fishermen were his quarry. The hunter roamed far, struck at random, and left no clues. He was as elusive as he was lethal. Investigators knew he had to be stopped, but no one knew how. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Most murderers have a connection to their victims and a motive for their crime, but not a serial killer. His victims are randomly chosen to fulfill an uncontrollable need to kill. Often he leads an ordinary life, his family and friends unaware of his homicidal passions. But serial killers establish profiles, as distinct as fingerprints, and when a match is made, it is only a matter of time before they are caught.
The rural counties of southern Ohio are hilly, rocky, and wide open. A quiet place for coal miners, factory workers, and farmers. The kind of place where people leave doors unlocked and where violent crime is almost unheard of. On April 1st, 1989, 35-year-old Donald Welling did what he frequently did on Saturdays. He went jogging along the back roads of Tuscarawas County. His quiet morning run ended with a single shot. The rifle bullet ripped through Welling's heart, killing him instantly. Local authorities could find no motive and not a shred of evidence. The rifle was never found. November 10th, 1990, another Saturday morning, 19 months later. 21-year-old Jamie Paxton of Bannock, Ohio, rose early to go bow hunting. Leaving his crossbow in the car, he took a walk through the tall grass off State Route 9. Paxton was alone and unarmed. He didn't notice the red pickup truck that stopped a short distance away. The gunman was quiet and careful. Jamie Paxton was shot 3 times by a high-powered rifle. There were no witnesses. The killing horrified a quiet community that considered murder to be a problem for big cities. Hunting accidents are not uncommon in southern Ohio, but Belmont County Sheriff Tom McCourt knew right away that this wasn't a hunting accident.
When we saw more than one wound, we knew that it could not be an accident. That an accidental death hunting accident is called a one-shot. Plus, we saw it was a bullet wound instead of something from an arrow, and gun season was not in yet.
Sheriff Tom McCourt's jurisdiction is large geographically, but the community is closely knit. There, people work hard, and everyone seems to know everyone. McCourt even knew Jamie Paxton. What he didn't know was who killed him. The gunman had left no clues.
We checked the area for spent, empty cartridge cases, for tire tracks, for anything in that area of where we thought the shot came from. We also checked the area around the body looking for the spent projectiles that had passed through the body. We even took metal detectors in looking for the projectiles. At that time, we were unable to find anything. We're gonna run over there by the marina and see.
After interviewing Jamie Paxton's friends, family, and acquaintances, they were unable to find anyone with a motive to kill him.
Everyone in the area knew Jamie Paxton. No one that we knew of or was able, even to this day, have ever found anyone who disliked a young man.
Sheriff McCourt had an apparently random killing of a popular young man with no history of trouble. A seemingly unsolvable murder with no physical evidence and no witnesses. Not even a plausible theory about what happened.
I think that's about it.
After her son's death, Jean Paxton's grief impelled her to action. She began composing letters to a local paper, the Martins Ferry Times Leader, designed to draw out the killer.
There was just every time I would sit down to write a letter, I would say a prayer. And I would say, please God, just give me the words to get to the person that killed my son.
The letters were at once stern and passionate. To the murderer of my son Jamie, she wrote, would it be easier for you if I wrote words of hate? I can't because I don't feel hate. I feel deep sorrow at losing my son. You took a light from my life last November and left me with many days of darkness. Have you thought of your own death? It'll happen. Unless you confess your sin and ask for God's forgiveness, you will face the fire and fury of hell at your own death. If the killer were reading Jean Paxton's letters, he seemed unaffected by them. On November 28, 1990, just 18 days after Paxton's murder, 30-year-old Kevin Loring was on a hunting trip in Muskingum County, Ohio, some 40 miles from where Jamie Paxton was killed. While his friends finished eating lunch, Kevin decided to get a head start. Walking across a field in search of game, Loring himself became prey, unknowingly moving into the sights of the gunman. Loring was killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. The killer had taken care to commit his murders in different counties to slow an investigation that would have to take place over hundreds of rural miles. The result? Investigators in Muskingum County were unaware of the other sniper victims in nearby counties. They decided that Loring's death was probably a hunting accident. Jean Paxton never gave up. She kept writing throughout 1991, determined to draw out Jamie's killer.
And I always felt if I could get my letters into the hands of the person that killed my son, I felt that I could get a response from them.
She turned out to be right. I am the murderer of Jamie Paxton, the typewritten letter read. Jamie Paxton was a complete stranger to me. I never saw him before in my life, and he never said a word to me that Saturday. Paxton was killed because of an irresistible compulsion that has taken over my life. I knew when I left my house that day that someone would die by my hand. I just didn't know who or where. I'm an average-looking person with a family, a job, and home, just like yourself. Something in my head causes me to turn into a merciless killer with no conscience. The letter arrived at the Martins Ferry Times-Leader a few days before the one-year anniversary of Jamie's death. The letter described the Paxton murder in chilling detail. I was very drunk, and a voice in my head said, "Do it." I stopped my car behind Jamie's and got out. Jamie started walking very slowly down the hill toward the road. I raised my rifle to my shoulder and lined him up in the sights. I took at least 5 seconds to take careful aim. My first shot was off a little bit and hit him in the right chest. He groaned and went down. I wanted to make sure he was finished, so I fired a second shot aimed halfway between his hip and shoulder while he was prone on the ground. I jerked the shot and hit him in the knee. He never moved again. 5 minutes after I shot Paxton, I was drinking a beer and had blacked out all thoughts of what I had just done out of my mind. I thought no more of shooting Paxton than shooting a bottle at the dump. I know you hate my guts, and rightfully so. I think about Jamie every hour of the day, as I'm sure you do. For Sheriff McCourt, the letter was a beginning, evidence that might lead to a murderer. But he needed more. The typewriter used to write the letter, a gun. While investigators searched, the killer continued his own hunting. Saturday, March 14th, 1992. Claude Hawkins got off his midnight shift at the Pittsburgh Plate and Glass Company about sunup. It was a good time to fish, and Hawkins went straight to a favorite spot on the river below Wills Creek Dam. Hawkins had a wife and 4 children. Another outdoorsman had been killed while alone, but this one took place on federal property. The FBI stepped in. The FBI joined the hunt for the roadside sniper who just killed his latest victim on federal property. Investigators from the 3 counties involved, along with the FBI and the Ohio Division of Wildlife, formed a task force. It didn't take long to realize how few clues they had. In each case, the killer had no contact with the victim, no rifling of pockets, no robbery. Shell casings had been carefully removed, and the victim's cars were untouched. Special Agent Harry Trombitis was stationed at the FBI's Columbus, Ohio field office.
What we did know is that Mr. Hawkins died from a gunshot, and usually you would find some type of a shell casing in the area. And I remember looking very hard, metal detectors and hands and knees for any shell casings in that, and none were ever found. And so that was something that, you know, if in fact we had somebody who was evidence conscious enough to pick up the shell casing after they shot and killed somebody, we were dealing with a different brand of person here.
The multi-jurisdictional task force concluded that the death of Kevin Loring, first ruled accidental, was actually a homicide.
We got a problem.
Okay, what I got is,
Reviewing the 4 murders, the investigative team saw plenty in common. Outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, or joggers, alone in a rural setting, all shot with a high-powered rifle. All but one of the murders occurred on a weekend, and the killer was careful enough to leave no evidence.
Didn't have any interest in his victims.
It was more clear than ever that a single individual was responsible. The task force was on the trail of a serial killer. As they began to mobilize, the killer struck again.
I know we can capture this person. I know we can.
10 days after the task force meeting, on April 5, 1992, 44-year-old steelworker Gary Brett had left his home in neighboring West Virginia to go pond fishing in Noble County. Bradley's wife and 3 children would never see him alive again. The task force had another murder. The road sniper had to be stopped. The task force wanted to learn more about the personality of the sniper. They asked the FBI to draw up a psychological profile of the serial killer. Such an outline would be invaluable in tracking him down.
Okay, good. Well, maybe there's something there we can
Major Dane Shryock of the Coshocton County Sheriff's Office headed the task force.
Right after we had initially made an assessment that maybe these things might be linked, the Columbus FBI office set up a meeting to have the behavioral science unit come to Columbus, Ohio, and actually sit down and talk with the investigators of these 5 counties of the homicides.
The FBI's behavioral science unit in Quantico, Virginia, can accurately sketch personality profiles of individuals from sparse clues. Larry Ankrum is a member of the behavioral science unit assigned to the road sniper case. He studied all the available evidence, the investigative reports of the 5 murders, and especially the letter that the killer had written to Gene Paxton.
Then I came back to Quantico and reviewed these cases more in detail, and I came out with a formal profile. We were probably looking for a white male. We were looking for someone that was intelligent, someone who was an outdoorsman himself, someone that wouldn't look out of place in the woods, someone that was probably responding to some significant event in his life that was going wrong at that particular time. One of the things that was apparent that it was a sniper type mentality here that we were dealing with, someone that didn't want confrontation, someone that was doing things from afar, and this is something that we see many times with our arsonists. We ought to be looking at some different types of activities that he might be involved in, such as nuisance types of offenses, shooting out windows, shooting out tires of cars, cruelty to animals, arson fires.
Ankrum believed that the violence was triggered by stress and fueled by alcohol. The task force now had a psychological sketch of the roadside sniper. And they had his letter. FBI forensic scientists studied the letter intensely. They found distinguishing features in the typeface. If they could find the typewriter it was written on, it would be easy to link the confessional letter to the owner, and thus link the murder to the murderer. They had to hurry. The sniper was still out there. On July 21st, 1992, two hunters in a state park in Muskingum County came face to face with the killer. As they moved through the brush, one of them noticed something terrifying. A nearby figure with a gun pointed right at them. They called out to him, and the man scurried away to a red pickup truck. It happened too quickly for the hunters to get a good look at the man or the vehicle's tag numbers. Bewildered, they called local police, who alerted the task force. Throughout 1992, desperate to catch a man still ready to kill, the task force investigated and cleared more than 100 suspects. By August 1992, after 3 years, the investigation had hit a dead end. The task force was badly in need of information and decided to go public.
It is in the opinion of this multi-agency task force that these homicides...
They held a press conference and issued a press release detailing the FBI profile of the man they wanted and asking anyone with information to come forward.
The FBI made a press release, and it was done at one time to mass, and it got everybody. 6 o'clock news, I mean, everybody was showing this case. And the phone started ringing instantly.
Wilson.
One of those calls, received at task force headquarters on August 26, 1992, sparked a lead. The man on the phone was named Richard Fry. He said he thought the task force should know about a high school friend of his named Thomas Dillon.
D-I-L-L-O-N.
Investigators had a name and someone willing to talk. A task force member arranged to meet Richard Fry at a rest stop on Route 77.
Tom Dillon. I went to high school with him. We grew up together.
There, Fry talked about his old friend, Tom Dillon.
He was always a little strange.
They used to drive around rural Ohio, shooting at road signs and small animals. But Fry eventually found Dillon too eccentric and violent for his taste. Obsessed with serial killers like Ted Bundy, Dillon had taken to killing family pets and cattle and setting random fires. Fry got married and for most of the 1980s forgot about his strange friend. But in 1989, Fry ran into Thomas Dillon at a gun show in Cleveland.
Tom? Thomas.
Dillon invited him to ride along with him again, just like in the old days. Old friendships die hard, and Richard Fry again found himself driving the back roads of rural Ohio, drinking beer and shooting road signs. But Dillon had deteriorated, Fry discovered. Dillon asked whether Fry thought Dillon had ever killed anyone.
We've known each other for a long time.
20-some years, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think I could ever kill anybody?
Tom, like you said, we go way back. I mean...
He discussed how to get away with random killings, including the tactic of killing in different counties to thwart investigators.
Kill them in separate counties, They never connected. And being at random, They'd have no clues whatsoever.
Not average, your average guy.
Fry said that when he read the press release, he immediately thought of Tom Dillon.
Tell me what kind of vehicle he drives.
He gave a description of Dillon, including the vehicle he drove, a red pickup truck, just like the one spotted by the
Yes,
hunters.
as a matter of fact, it is.
Lieutenant Walt Wilson of the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office was a task force member. His job was to follow up on leads and tips, which were coming much more frequently as press coverage of the case increased. He decided Tom Dillon fit the FBI profile and needed to be investigated.
I began to follow up on the information that Mr. Fry had given us. I went to Tom Dillon's workplace in the city of Canton.
Dillon had been employed for a dozen years as a draftsman at the Canton, Ohio Water Works. Wilson obtained Thomas Dillon's work schedule to compare Dillon's days off with the dates and times of the murders. The purpose was to eliminate Dillon as a suspect, but he couldn't. He found that Dillon didn't work weekends when most of the incidents occurred, but that didn't prove much. However, 2 weekdays Dillon took off from work caught Wilson's attention. July 21st, 1992, the day the hunters saw a man point a rifle at them, and November 28th, 1990, the day Kevin Loring was killed.
Please.
Dillon could be the one. As the other members of the task force followed up on hundreds of leads, Detective Wilson began surveillance on Thomas Dillon. Maybe Dillon would return to a crime scene or lead investigators to more clues. The surveillance began in October 1992. Detective Wilson followed Tom Dillon on his weekend excursions, driving the back roads of southern Ohio.
Typically, a day would start around 7 in the morning on Tom's days off, the weekends usually, and he would leave his home, and sometimes he would stop at a convenience store and buy some beer, and then he would go south of his home into other counties, just driving all the back remote roadways.
On October 10th, 1992, while tailing Dillon, Wilson briefly lost track of the suspect's vehicle. As Wilson crept around a corner, he came face to face with Thomas Dillon. His cover possibly blown, his case in jeopardy, Wilson had to think fast.
I waved at him and he waved at me and we kept on going. He stopped at the end of the drive to see if I was going to stay there or not.
Wilson couldn't risk being identified. He let Dillon drive away.
My big concern was I hope he doesn't stop and ask me what I'm doing on that property, because I had all of my gear laying in the car with me, and I didn't want him to see my radios and my gear that I had with me.
A few days later, Larry Oler of Barnhill, Ohio, was hunting about 150 yards off a road in Tuscarawas County. He heard a car stop. Through the trees, he saw a stocky white male. The man lifted a rifle. Oler was unhurt and watched in terror as the truck sped away. Although Oler's description of his assailant resembled Dillon, he was unable to make a positive identification. The task force realized that Thomas Dillon was their most likely suspect. Surveillance of him would have to be beefed up. Throughout October and November of 1992, the FBI coordinated a massive air and ground surveillance. Dillon was observed shooting road signs and busting car windows with rocks. Exactly the sort of petty vandalism outlined in the FBI profile. But if they arrested Dillon for vandalism, they might never gather enough evidence to arrest him for the murders. It is difficult to tail someone on an empty rural road in broad daylight. The stakes were high. If Dillon tried another shooting and the FBI weren't in the right spot, they could have another murder. If they crowded Dillon too much, they might be found out, and Dillon would slip into hiding. The ground surveillance had to be well off of Dillon. Agent Trombitis and Captain Shryock relied on the air surveillance as their eyes and ears. They would move in if something happened. One day, the surveillance team faced its worst fear. Trombitis and Shryock were far behind Dillon when the air surveillance called out an alert. Up ahead of Dillon, on the road, was the classic profile of a road sniper victim, a jogger, female this time, alone, in a rural setting. If Thomas Dillon were indeed the gunman, this jogger may be irresistible bait. Trombitis and Shryock got nervous. Hoping for the best, they sped forward. Dillon continued too, right toward the jogger. Driving at top speed, Trombitis and Shryock frantically called to the agents in the plane. Where is he? Is he stopping? The airplane reported back. Dillon is approaching her. There is no one nearby. The agent's car hurtled forward. A call from the air. Dillon is pulling up alongside the jogger. The agents held their breath. He passed her without incident. The feeling of relief lasted only moments. The airplane radioed that Dillon had taken a right turn onto a smaller road. The aerial unit stayed on him, instructing Trombitis and Shryock where to turn. Then a second right turn. Could he be circling back? They called to the airplane, is the jogger still there? Dillon continued to make right turns until he was back on the road the jogger had been on. His U-turn justified the agent's fear. He was going back for her. Where is the jogger? Trombitis yelled into his radio. Cannot see the jogger, came the reply. But the agents knew she had to be somewhere ahead of Dillon. If he came upon her again, they were sure he would kill her. The air unit called in that Dillon had stopped his truck and had gotten out. He had something shiny in his hands. Would he kill her right under their noses? The jogger couldn't be seen from the air, but that didn't mean she wasn't there. The agents in the car heard shots and feared that Dillon had struck again while under their surveillance. But the airplane radioed that Dillon was shooting a stop sign. The jogger had turned off the road. She was safe, unaware of her close encounter with Thomas Dillon.
I think so.
The cat and mouse game with Thomas Dillon began to wear on the task force members.
I figure if we have 5 ground
A lot of pressure. I mean, you're wondering whether this guy today is going to go out and kill somebody and you aren't going to be able to stop it. And you know that he's probably the one that is responsible for killing other people. You're working 14, 16 hours a day. You're living out of a car. You're drinking coffee like policemen, you know, and you aren't eating right. And the stress is tremendous.
But the net continued to tighten around the suspect. The murderer, in his letter to the newspaper, had admitted being bothered by the Paxton murder and visiting his grave. Investigators returned to video footage of Jamie Paxton's grave recorded November 10th, 1991, the first anniversary of Jamie's murder. Many people paid their respects that day, but curiosity rather than respect was the agenda of one visitor photographed, Thomas Dillon. Investigators immediately recognized the man they had been tailing. Surely he was the sniper, but to earn a conviction they needed direct, incriminating evidence. After After the second anniversary of Jamie Paxton's death in 1992, surveillance observed Dillon entering the Times-Leader building. He bought a copy of the previous day's paper, full of the details of the Paxton Memorial Service. The FBI had good circumstantial evidence on Thomas Dillon, but they still lacked physical evidence, a bullet, a gun, or a typewriter, to link him with just one of the victims. Hunting season was fast approaching. Dillon was still out roaming the rural roads, drunk, armed, deadly. The communities of southern Ohio had been terrorized for 3 years. The people feared going outside, but tried to live normal lives. Dillon had to be taken off the streets. The task force knew Dillon had been in trouble in the past for illegally owning a silencer and was forbidden to possess firearms, a stipulation he clearly violated during his vandalism sprees. The task force had little choice. Before he could kill again, they would arrest Thomas Dillon. But the plan wasn't just to arrest him on a weapons violation, but to convince him he was caught red-handed and get him to confess to murder. Lacking ballistic evidence and holding only a relatively minor weapons charge on Dillon, the FBI badly needed to elicit a confession. Trombitis had a plan.
Since we knew what his routine was through the surveillances and that, where he left his residence and he would go to this dairy mart every day before he left and went on his 300-400 mile drives, we would try to make the approach at the dairy mart. And what we had was an office building right across from the dairy mart where we occupied. We took over the basement of that building. Detective Wilson and I did was we went down into the basement where we were going to conduct the interview, and we put up along the walls of the whole room maps of the areas that he drove in, crime scene photographs, newspaper articles. We wanted to make that setting just irresistible to him.
Then we're just going to, piece by piece, start laying this out in front of him and see what kind of reaction we get from him.
It would be overwhelming, and you know, it would put him in the best frame of mind for us to be able to sit down and interview him and get a confession.
Mr. Dillon.
On November 27, 1992, the plan went into effect. Their entire case so far rested on getting a confession.
The idea was for when he came out of the dairy mart, we were going to approach him, identify ourselves, and basically request that he follow us voluntarily over to this room where we wanted to share some information with him and show him some things that we knew that would interest him.
If Dillon refused, Trombitis would raise his right hand to signal ATF agents who are responsible for making arrests in weapons cases to cuff Dillon.
And I can just remember his reaction. I mean, his jaw just for about 5 seconds, and then he composed himself and he said, "I want to talk to my attorney first."
That was the cue. Trombitis gave the signal and the ATF agents stepped in and arrested Thomas Dillon. Dillon didn't realize it, but it was a bitter defeat for the FBI. Trombitis thought he'd blown it, despite all the evidence he'd gathered. Despite his certainty that they had the road sniper, he feared that he would see a 5-time murderer quickly released on a minor weapons charge. At the very time of Dillon's arrest, other task force members were executing a search warrant on Dillon's house. Finally, the FBI felt they would come away with the physical evidence desperately needed to link him, once and for all, to the murders. But they didn't. To their surprise, the search turned up nothing more incriminating than some area maps marked with arson and vandalism sites. Dillon was refusing to talk. They were holding him, but there was nothing they could do with him.
It was pretty much over when he said he wanted to talk to his attorney. So we went back to the restaurant and we were going to have a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden we got the word that he wanted to talk to us. And so Walt and I jumped into our car and we made a beeline to Stark County Jail.
Trombitis and Wilson confronted Dillon with one piece of evidence after another. Photographs, videotapes, newspaper clippings showing his link to the murders.
I would pull out one piece at a time and show him, and just as we had suspected, he just was keenly interested in the information that we had, the surveillance pictures, the crime scene photos, you know, just the animal, you know, the shots of the animals that we had along the roadways and that. You could just see that he was just fascinated by that.
Fascinated but not talkative, Dillon said it would serve no purpose to admit anything now. Another dead end for the FBI. Dillon's attorney is arguing that he should be spared jail time on the weapons charge. Now, unless something turned up on him very quickly, Thomas Dillon would have to be released.
Thank the various representatives of the media for showing up today.
The task force was now fighting the clock. Desperate for physical evidence, they held another press conference, appealing to the public for any information about guns they may have bought or sold with Thomas Dillon.
Haven't had any contact with Mr. Dillon.
Meanwhile, task force member Jerry Wade of the Ohio Division of Wildlife was following up on a tip. A witness steered Wade to a spot where he had seen Thomas Dillon firing his rifle a couple of years back. Wade hoped that would lead him to some ballistic evidence to link Dillon to one of the killings.
This individual that brought it to our attention that he'd seen Thomas Lee Dillon shoot this deer with a rifle thought the rifle might be one of them that was used. And if we could locate some physical evidence, the shell casings per se, and if we could get those and match them to the murder weapon, we could put that rifle in Thomas Lee Dillon's hand prior to the murders, which would really give us a lot stronger case as far as him possessing the rifle prior to the murders.
The chances of finding small shells in such a wide area were slim, and it had been 2 years since the rifle had been fired there. Determined, Wade patiently combed inch by inch through a grassy field where the anonymous witness said he saw Dillon shoot the deer. Beginning at the tree described by the witness, Wade searched the area in a circular pattern by hand and with a metal detector, carefully marking off the territory. Miraculously, Wade hit the jackpot. He found 2 rifle shell casings, later identified as coming from the same gun that killed Gary Bradley and Claude Hawkins. Finally, a physical link to the murders.
I felt like celebrating. It was just unbelievable that I found them, because after the time, the length of time that had been since the shooting and the incident, and the individual wasn't sure the location of the tree exactly. The scene had changed since he had been there. They had removed a fence row and pushed out the area. So I felt very, very much fortunate to find him, and I felt like a celebration at the time. It was just like, you know, it was a gift handed to you.
Meanwhile, the publicity from the press conference asking the public for help was about to bear fruit. On December 4th, Captain Shryock was manning the phones at Task Force headquarters. A man named Al Cope was on the phone.
Can you give me that?
He said he bought a weapon from someone who may have been Thomas Dillon at a gun show the previous spring.
I'll tell you what, if you give me about 15 minutes, sir, I'll be right there.
The date? April 5th, the same day Gary Bradley was murdered. The rifle was sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington for ballistics testing. Special Agent Paul Schrecker is a ballistics expert for the FBI.
As the bullet passes down the barrel of the weapon, that bullet, by coming in direct contact with the interior of the barrel of the weapon, picks up the microscopic imperfections, the microscopic features of that barrel. So that bullet is marked with the fingerprint of that barrel.
Fragments of bullets taken from the bodies of victims Claude Hawkins and Gary Bradley were examined at FBI labs.
A bullet fragment may still be of value for comparison. Even though a bullet may fragment, may break up as a result of striking a victim, and maybe only fragments are ever recovered, those fragments are still marked. They still bear the impressions of the inside of the barrel of the weapon. And those fragments can still be used to make a positive association or an identification. When the weapon was submitted to our laboratory, the weapon was test fired, and the test fired bullets from this weapon were then compared to the bullet fragments taken from the victims.
Al Cope's gun was test fired, and the bullets examined for characteristics they may have in common with the bullet fragments taken from Gary Bradley and Claude Hawkins. The conclusion? Al Cope's gun, sold to him by Thomas Dillon, matched the gun used to kill both Gary Bradley and Claude Hawkins. The FBI finally had the goods on Thomas Dillon.
Close the door, please.
Agent Trombitis visited Dillon in jail and confronted him with the evidence. He and his truck fit the descriptions of the few witnesses. He had been off work when each murder had occurred. He had a history of random violence and gunplay. And the FBI could prove in court that a gun he once owned killed at least 2 of the victims.
Kind of proof.
What kind of proof? All the proof we need.
But Trombitis knew Dillon was guilty of all 5 murders, and he wanted closure for the victims' families. He offered Dillon a deal. As leverage, Trombitis reminded Dillon that he faced Ohio's electric chair. Dillon got nervous, and he began to negotiate.
And what's your assessment of the situation? I still can't believe you got that hard evidence. Well, we have evidence.
Thomas Dillon met with the prosecutors in June of 1993. He agreed to admit to 5 killings if the death penalty were dropped as a possible sentence.
Terms, 1 each for each of the acts committed.
On July 9th, Dillon confessed to prosecutors in order to save his life. On July 12, 1993, a smirking Thomas Dillon walked into the Noble County Courthouse to make his plea.
Mr. Dillon, at this time, how do you plead to count 1 in the indictment in case number 93 CR4 involving the death of the aggravated murder charge involving the death of Gary Bradley? How do you plead? Guilty.
With the families of the victims watching, Dillon confessed to murdering Donald Welling, Kevin Loring, Claude Hawkins, Gary Bradley, and Jamie Paxton. He was still smirking and unrepentant as he left court.
At this time of the indictment in case number 93 CR4. Guilty.
Hello?
Jolene. Hi.
Tom.
This is Thomas. Yeah.
Dillon's incredibly cavalier attitude was detailed by a local reporter whom Dillon repeatedly called from prison,
Can't get enough of me.
marveling at his own violence, reveling in his celebrity, and laughing off the murders.
Let's talk about the other guys. I mean, they
Except
were
one.
really good shit.
He would not discuss
I
the
wanna talk
murder
about
of
Jamie.
Jamie Paxton.
No, forget it, all right? Just forget it.
Jean Paxton, Jamie's mother, was in court the day Dillon pleaded guilty.
I just want to talk to him about Jamie, the kind of person Jamie was. Jamie was everything Thomas Dillon could never be. Dillon is a coward. He hid behind a gun, and Jamie was not that way. Little did I know that on the evening news he was watching that, and it made him very angry that I had called him a pathetic coward.
We talked to him about remorse and how did you feel after these homicides, and the only one that he said that it really bothered him about was Jamie Paxton. He said, "I didn't realize the kid was so young."
Jean Paxton had looked forward to confronting Dillon in court, but his guilty plea cost her that opportunity. She asked Sheriff McCourt to arrange a conversation.
Hi.
McCourt agreed. That evening, Jean Paxton's phone rang. She found herself speaking with the murderer of her son.
When I picked up the phone that evening, it was just like somebody calling up to sell me something. He said, "Mrs. Paxton, this is Tom Dillon." It was just almost more than I could comprehend. The tone of his voice, the way he came across. Still, the arrogance was there.
You really hurt my feelings this afternoon when...
Dillon told Jean Paxton that when she called him a coward, she had hurt his feelings.
I really don't think he expected to get what he got from me. I think that Thomas Dillon could have handled the crying, the screaming, the saying of calling names, the cursing. I think he could handle that, but I did not lower myself to that level. I talked to him as a mother, and I really feel that through this whole thing, that is what got to Thomas Dillon.
Well, I understand.
After 3 years, Jean Paxton felt vindicated.
I felt really good. I walked out on my front porch, and I just felt like for the first time in 3 years that I was free. I was free of Thomas Dillon. I felt that I had defeated him by words, and I did it all for Jamie.
Thomas Dillon made it clear he did not want to go to Lucasville Prison, the toughest in Ohio. So Jean Paxton saw to it, with a petition drive, that was exactly where Dillon was sent. In August 1993, Jean Paxton won a $25 million wrongful death judgment against any future money Dillon might make. Dillon's wife had been trying to sell his story to Hollywood. Paxton and State Senator Bob Nye passed the Paxton Bill, barring killers or their relatives from profiting from the crime. Thomas Dillon remains in Lucasville Prison. He is eligible for parole in 165 years. It was Mother's Day, May 13th, 1984, a warm spring afternoon near Tampa, Florida. After spending time with their moms, two boys raced off to fly parachutes made from plastic bags. It was the perfect way to spend a Sunday. But soon, the wind brought a foul smell. They went off to investigate and found a sight they would remember for the rest of their lives.
In 1984 in South Florida, a rapist and murderer was on the loose. The killer was a ruthless and terrifying predator, the newest member of an infamous group known as serial killers. He kills just for the sake of it. And though his acts at first seem random, his choice of victims is fiercely selective. A woman's occupation, or even her hairstyle, may be enough to make her a target. It takes time, at least 2 kills, before the pattern emerges. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. The serial killer's world is a delicate balance. On one side is the threat of capture. On the other is his overwhelming need to publicize his crime. Our job is to use everything at our disposal to tip the balance in our favor.
What the boys found was the body of a nude woman lying in the roadside weeds. The medical examiner determined she'd been there for about 3 days. Her wrists were bound behind her back, and a rope with a trailing extension was tied around her neck like a leash. Bruises, blisters, and insects covered her body. But it was the position of the corpse that told detectives this was not a typical murder case. Major Gary Terry, then Lieutenant Terry, had just been appointed head of the Hillsborough County Major Crimes Unit when he got the call.
But the unique thing about the body to me was the fact that her legs were spread about 5 foot, 5 foot 1 inches apart from heel to heel. A scene that I'll never forget and a scene that I've never seen before.
The pose was so grotesque, the body seemed to have been positioned that way deliberately. Had the killer meant to shock whoever found it? Crime scene technicians photographed the body and measured its distance from the road. They carefully packaged what little evidence was left, some cloth tied in a knot. Detective Pops Baker of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department also found tire tracks. He worked that night to make plaster casts. Tire casts can reveal the make and size of tires to help experts deduce the size and type of car a criminal is driving. They can also link him to a crime scene. Meanwhile, the body was brought to the medical examiner's office with the ligatures in place for him to study and photograph.
Is there any physical signs?
The medical examiner determined the victim had been raped, then strangled to death. The brutality of the crime brought a sense of urgency to the investigation. Fearing this would not be an isolated case, Lieutenant Terry immediately contacted the FBI's forensics lab in Washington, D.C. Terry had a detective hand-carry the evidence to the FBI lab. He had learned during an earlier case that doing so expedited the processing of evidence and brought the FBI in as an immediate active partner. The FBI lab is one of the foremost forensics laboratories in the country. There are experts on every type of evidence, from bullets to fibers to vehicle parts to nuts. The FBI's knot expert analyzed the ligatures from the Tampa victim's wrists and throat. They had been removed intact in hopes they'd tie the killer to his deed. They might also say something about his past. Specialized knots might reveal that he had been a merchant marine or in the military. But the ligatures turned out to be tied in granny knots, simple, functional knots that anyone might have tied. An FBI fiber expert analyzed the fabric found near the body. He brushed particles from the cloth onto a sterile sheet. What traces had the killer left behind? The analyst scanned the particles with a magnifier, but he didn't expect to find much. Such evidence is easily lost through weather or other contamination of the crime scene. In fact, the rule of thumb for fiber evidence is, in 4 hours, 80% is lost. In 48 hours, it's 96%. After 3 days, the chance of finding anything is almost nil. So he was amazed when he found a small speck of red nylon fiber. It was trilobal, meaning it consisted of 3 lobes and had a lustrous or shiny coating. From its size, type, and shape, he guessed it was a carpet fiber, maybe from the killer's car. The fact that it was there at all was a minor miracle. The analyst from the FBI lab told the Hillsborough detectives to keep the discovery secret. If this were a serial killer, publicizing fiber evidence could make him change his pattern or his vehicle, so he'd be harder to find. The FBI's tire lab also scored. From the tire casts, they determined the tires were of 2 different brands. All were well worn and mounted reversed, with the black walls facing out. An irregularity like that could be powerful, incriminating evidence. Back in Tampa, police identified the victim from her fingerprints the day after her body was found. She was Lana Long, a 20-year-old Laotian woman, a popular exotic dancer in Tampa's red light district. Her boyfriend had recognized her from a newspaper photo and had called police. He became the prime suspect. Officers questioned the girls on the strip but received no information implicating the boyfriend or anyone else. They were stumped.
Okay, I'll meet you up here at the tape.
Then, just 2 weeks later, the calm of another holiday weekend was broken. On Memorial Day Sunday, Detective Pops Baker and Lieutenant Gary Terry of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office were called to a second murder scene, again in an isolated rural area off an interstate.
Young female, late 18, 19, 20 range.
Like Lana Long, this victim was female, in her late teens to early 20s, and nude. She was also bound at the hands and throat and had a knot at her neck with a leash-like extension. But this knot was different. It was a hangman-style noose.
I can remember driving all the way to the crime scene and saying to myself, please don't let this victim be bound. In 1984, we very rarely had homicide victims bound. That's the first thing I asked the officer protecting the crime scene when I drove up. Is she bound? And he said, yes, sir, she is. So we've gone from very rarely having victims bound to 2 within 2 weeks. So we knew we had a problem.
This woman had not been dead long.
She's still warm.
Because the crime scene was fresher than the last, more evidence remained. Detectives found a man's olive green t-shirt and some strands of hair, which they determined were not the victim's. Hanging from a bush a few feet away from the woman's head were her white pantyhose and white jumpsuit, both covered with blood. From the brutality of her wounds, detectives knew she had fought for her life, and that it had been a savage struggle. She had been raped, strangled, beaten, and her throat had been cut almost from ear to ear. The medical examiner reported 3 causes of death: asphyxiation, head injuries, and a lacerated throat. As before, Baker found tire tracks. Casks were taken for analysis in comparison to the ones found at the first murder scene. Once again, the crime scene evidence was hand-delivered to the FBI lab in Washington. Analysts found the same red, lustered trilobal carpet fibers as at the first scene. And this time, there were red trilobal delustered fibers too, with the shiny coating absent. It said fiber evidence is the silent witness, but this match seemed to scream that the cases were linked. Lana Long's boyfriend could not be tied to the second murder, and he was cleared as a suspect. The items found at the scene also provided other clues. The green t-shirt was a size large, suggesting a person of medium build and chest size. The head hairs were medium brown, from a male Caucasian. These 2 pieces of information began a physical evidence profile, which are shared with other law enforcement agencies. FBI tire expert Sandy Worsema analyzed the tire impressions and made another match. The tracks were the same as those from the first murder scene. Now she knew the position of each tire on the car and that they were mounted on a mid-sized vehicle.
The advantage of having a cast over the photograph is that I can actually pick the cast up, I can light it from different angles and different directions, and hopefully if there are any cuts or nicks or rocks that are caught in the tire, I'll be able to see that in the cast.
But perhaps the best clue came from what she didn't know. She knew 2 of the tires with a common Goodyear Viva brand, but a third wasn't on the FBI's extensive reference list.
One of the tire impressions they could not identify from their files. But what they did was gave us the name of a tire expert, a manufacturer out in Akron, Ohio. And we actually flew a detective, Corporal Baker flew out there personally with the tire impressions, met with the old salts out there at the tire factory, and they actually were able to identify that tire for us, and that was the Vogue tire. And in 1984 was a handmade tire that comes as standard equipment on Cadillacs. We had never even seen a tire like that before.
Back here over to the left. Back here,
Police were told that if they found the car with that tire, mounted black walls out, it would be as positive an ID as a fingerprint. Analysis of the victim's knife wound revealed that the killer had a knife with a 3-inch blade.
Now we've got 2 victims, both bound and both connected forensically. So we knew we had a serial killer on our hands at that time.
It's just a gut feeling when I got it.
Lieutenant Terry began to track the killer's strikes on a map, hoping they'd reveal a pattern of behavior.
Dump the bodies on.
He put out the word to patrol officers. Look for a white male with brown hair of medium build, driving a mid-sized car with the tires reversed. He may be carrying a knife with a 3-inch blade. Following the FBI's recommendation, Terry didn't mention the fiber evidence or the ligatures. From a composite drawing released to the media, the second victim was identified. 22-year-old Michelle Sims had a criminal history of prostitution. She'd been reported missing the day before. A key member of the Hillsborough County investigative team was Detective Randy Latimer.
At this point, though, we realized we're dealing with a serial killer that it looked like he was probably preying on prostitutes. So we went out into the areas of the known prostitute areas and started contacting the girls and let them know what was going on, giving them our business cards that if they saw something strange to contact us, let us know. We're looking for information. We were frustrated that we couldn't get any leads, we couldn't get anything to go on.
Hey, Bob, what do we got? Well, I've got a body down here.
Then on June 24th, another Sunday, Terry, Baker, and Latimer responded to a third murder scene. A worker had found a body in an orange grove.
got a perimeter set up.
It was another female, but the pattern seemed different. This one was fully clothed and there were no ligatures, so there was no reason to believe it was linked.
Well, as you can see,
But detectives didn't rule it out.
looks like it's been undisturbed for quite some time.
They delivered the victim's clothing to the FBI lab, just in case a connection could be found. This time, the fiber expert they had worked with before was not available, and someone else was assigned. He wasn't asked to compare the new evidence to the old, so he didn't. Nor did he begin the analysis immediately.
Doesn't look like
The body was so badly decomposed it only weighed 25 pounds, including clothes. It took some time to get an ID, and when it finally came, the victim's lifestyle didn't fit the pattern either. 22-year-old Elizabeth Ludenbach of Tampa was a shy assembly line worker who lived with her family. She had no criminal history and was not a prostitute, although she did frequent bars on Tampa's Strip. A note in Elizabeth's room said to find her boyfriend if anything happened to her. So detectives ordered a polygraph test.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you just need to answer yes or no to those questions. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Did you know Elizabeth Ludenbach?
Yes.
Did you have a relationship with Elizabeth Ludenbach?
Yes.
Did you ever harm Elizabeth Ludenbach?
No.
He failed the polygraph test, making him the prime suspect. It wasn't until mid-September, 3 months after the discovery of Elizabeth's body in the orange grove, that the results came in.
Yeah?
The FBI had a match.
Yeah.
They found
That's
red carpet
fantastic.
fibers identical to those found in the first two murders.
Looks like Ludenbach is ours. They
Good.
found red fibers that connected up.
Now they had 3 related killings. Terry entered the new scene on the map.
Any kind of significant difference?
Every detective on the homicide squad was working the case. The nature of the investigation began to change. Instead of focusing on boyfriends and neighbors, detectives pursued an unknown killer terrorizing the women of Tampa.
We've taken the entire homicide unit now, are concentrating on these cases. And we're running down leads, we're getting telephone calls about different people, and we're checking those leads out. We're doing a background investigation of these particular victims, and we're coming up empty. And all we have to do is, unfortunately, wait, and then there's another victim is discovered. And that is victim number 4.
After a lull of more than 3 months, the calm of yet another Sunday was shattered. On October 7th, a worker found a body near the entrance to the K-Bar Ranch in northern Hillsborough County. This time, Detective Steve Cribb was assigned to help process the scene. He, Terry, Baker, and Latimer didn't have to look far for the first grim piece of evidence: the victim's bra hanging from the entrance gate. The nude body of a young black woman was nearby. Her clothing was beside her. Most of the detectives ruled her out as a serial victim. She had been raped, but unlike the others, she had been shot, not strangled, and there were no ligatures. Also, she was African American, and usually serial killers don't cross racial boundaries.
Get her into a controlled environment, we'd be able to really inspect.
While the FBI analyzed the evidence, detectives identified the victim from fingerprints. 18-year-old Chanel Devon Williams had just recently been released from jail on a prostitution arrest when she disappeared. She was last seen working the red light district along Nebraska Avenue with a friend, another prostitute, a few days before. She had been dead about 6 days. The FBI's hair and fiber analysis revealed it was the work of the serial killer. Both types of red fibers were found on Chanel's clothing, along with a brown Caucasian pubic hair. By crossing racial bounds and using a different weapon, the killer had changed his routine. Shifting from a pattern is very rare in serial killers and would make this one more difficult to capture. Chanel was added to the map near the Pasco-Hillsborough County line. With 4 dead, detectives were desperate to find the killer and obsessed with the case.
You don't work these cases. You live and breathe these types of cases. You go home at night You dream about this case. You eat and sleep it. I would go home at night and just look at the telephone, waiting for it to ring. Every Sunday, for some reason, the first series of bodies were discovered on Sunday. On Sunday, I didn't plan anything. I sat at home.
Indeed, the Sunday after Chanel's body turned up, Terry, Baker, Latimer, and Cribb were called to another murder scene. This one was near Lake Thanodasassa, northeast of Tampa. A couple of amateur archaeologists had uncovered a morbid find. At the side of the road was a woman's body, wrapped in a gold-colored bedspread, tied with a blue jogging suit.
Thank you. We need that.
Inside, her lower legs and ankles were bound with common white string. Her hands were tied in front of her with a red bandana. She had been bound, raped, strangled, hit on the forehead, and dragged through the dirt. It seemed the killer was back to his old pattern. The woman was quickly identified from fingerprints as 28-year-old Karen Dinsfriend. Raised in an affluent suburban household, she had died a drug-ravaged prostitute. She was last seen alive in the early hours of the day she was killed. As if there weren't enough to link the killer to the crime, investigator Steve Cribb actually saw red trilobal carpet fibers on Karen's body. By now, he'd developed a sixth sense for them.
When you know what you're looking for, they almost look like glowworms on the victims. But for the average person to walk up and find them, even the other investigators who weren't looking for this type, they wouldn't see them. But they became such a key point of the investigation that when we went to a crime scene, that's one of the first things we would look for with the carpet fibers.
At the FBI lab, the fiber expert compared these fibers to the ones from the other crime scenes. They matched. There were now 5 cases linked to a single killer, but there was still no name, no face, and no one under arrest.
It becomes very frustrating that you know someone else is going to die because you haven't stopped the suspect. You have enough information to know that he's doing it, but not enough information to pick him out of the crowd if he were to bump into you walking down the mall.
Because you have to remember, in this series of cases, our concern is if we don't stop this guy, if we don't find him today, he's going to kill somebody tomorrow or the next day. And when in fact he did.
2 weeks later, on Halloween, another victim emerged. A contractor digging a ditch found the mummified remains of a woman's body. Terry, Baker, Latimer, and Cribb arrived at the scene. The medical examiner estimated the body had been there for about a month. The body was badly decomposed. An ID would require special measures. The FBI lab needed to soften the skin on the hands in order to get fingerprints. As hard as the victim was to identify, detectives instantly recognized the killer.
The body had been completely mummified. The head had been separated by animal activity. There were no ligatures attached, no clothing. And again, you just look at the body and you realize it's him again. You just have that feeling by now of the crime scenes, of seeing body after body after body, that it should be the same killer. And in fact, it was.
Then at 7:30 a.m., on Sunday, November 4th, a call came in to Tampa police that seemed unrelated. A man reported his daughter had been abducted and raped. 17-year-old Lisa McVeigh was leaving work at a Krispy Kreme donut shop on her bicycle. It was around 2:30 a.m. A man snatched her off her bike, threw her into his car, and drove off. He held her at gunpoint, reclined her seat so no one would see her, and told her to remove all of her clothes. He took her to his apartment, bound and gagged. She'd been sexually abused before, and she knew how to read the moods of an abuser. Lisa sensed resistance might send this man into a rage, so she quietly did what he wanted. Lisa memorized all she could about her surroundings. At first, she peeked out from beneath her blindfold. Then, when he uncovered her eyes, she saw everything, including his face. She was certain that now he'd never let her leave alive. He took her to his bedroom and repeatedly raped her for 24 hours. Sometimes he slept, but she knew he was armed and that he'd kill her if she tried to leave. After a full day of captivity, the man told Lisa to take a shower. Then he gave her some clothes and made her a sandwich. To her amazement, he said he would take her home. At around 3 a.m., they drove toward her neighborhood. On the way, he stopped at a 24-hour teller machine to withdraw money to get gas. Peeking under her blindfold, Lisa continued to memorize details. The Howard Johnsons, road signs, the word Magnum on the dashboard of his car. He finally released her near her home. After Lisa's adoptive father reported the abduction, she was interviewed by Tampa police officers.
I want to ask you everything that happened the night when you left work, and I'm going to record you.
They were amazed by her almost total recall and fierce resolve to catch the rapist.
Well, I always leave work about 12 o'clock. I got on my bike.
Although Lisa had not been killed, there were many similarities to the Hillsborough cases. The abduction, the rape, the man's build and hair color, and even the red interior of his car. Tampa police sent Lisa's sweater to the FBI lab.
We were inundating the FBI lab with things to compare for fiber samples. Rape cases, assault cases, anything sexually related, any violent crime, we were sent to the FBI lab for a fiber comparison.
Meanwhile, just a week after the last body was found, Pasco County detectives were called to another murder scene. On November 6, 1984, a woman's body was found on the same road as the fourth victim, Chanel Williams. Only this time it was to the north, in neighboring Pasco County. Pasco detectives called Hillsborough detectives to a vacant lot near a mobile home park.
If you look right here,
the body was in a different county, but the ligatures and fibers were all too familiar. Although the body had decomposed to mainly bones, the telltale leash was still attached around the neck.
a little bit of shoelace right around.
There was another ligature on an arm bone.
It's supposed to appear to be.
Near the body were the woman's tattered blouse and panties, and some jewelry.
Careful of that ligature around the neck. We're going to just leave that there.
The bones were scattered over almost an acre. When the medical examiner pieced them together, they seemed to belong to a young, white female. She was later identified as 18-year-old Virginia Johnson. Ginny divided her time between Connecticut and Florida, where she worked as a prostitute. She'd disappeared on her way to buy cigarettes about 3 weeks earlier. After all that time, it seemed impossible, but the FBI lab found a single red, lustrous fiber in Ginny Johnson's hair. Within the week, on November 12th, another jurisdiction fell prey to the killer. A body was found on an incline off North Orient Road within Tampa city limits. When Terry and Baker arrived, they found a young white woman, nude but for knee-high stockings. She was face down. When they turned her over, police knew from her bloodied face that she had been savagely beaten and that she had struggled. There were ligature marks on the front of her neck and on both wrists and arms, but no rope was found. Her wadded-up blue jeans and flowered top were near her body. Detectives Baker and Cribb immediately saw something stuck to the blue jeans, tiny red fibers. In the pocket of the jeans was the victim's driver's license. Kim Marie Swan was a 21-year-old part-time student who sidelined as an exotic dancer. She was last seen leaving a convenience store near her parents' home the previous afternoon. It seemed the killer had pulled off the road and thrown the body out of his car. There were faint tire impressions in the grass near the roadway. They would match the casts made earlier. The killer was picking up the pace of his killings, and the body count stood at 8. Terry and Baker were desperate. They drove to Atlanta to meet with a detective who helped crack the case of Wayne Williams, a serial killer believed to be responsible for 27 murders.
Because something we didn't really want to share publicly in 1984, what do you do when you're 10 bodies, 15, or 20 bodies down, and you don't have the suspect in custody? What do you do? We were sitting down in their office discovering, and during the course of that conversation, the telephone rang. And the telephone call was from the FBI in Washington. And the FBI lab says, we have just had a match on a piece of fiber evidence submitted from a rape case.
And I was blindfolded.
That case turned out to be the abduction and rape of Lisa McVeigh only a week earlier. Tampa police had rushed Lisa's clothing to the FBI lab, and experts there had found matching red trilobal carpet fibers on her sweater. It was the break they'd been waiting for. Terry flew back to Tampa immediately. He formed a task force of officers from the Hillsborough and Pasco County Sheriff's Office, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and the FBI, along with the Tampa police detectives already working the rape case. Then he divided them into teams, each with a different assignment. They initiated a massive manhunt. Patrol cars fanned out across North Tampa. They were looking for the killer's apartment and his red Dodge Magnum. The information from Lisa McVeigh was their roadmap. The additional personnel and resources brought in by the task force stepped up the search for Lisa McVeigh's abductor. Because the perpetrator used an ATM, one team of investigators subpoenaed the November 4th bank records for all local automatic teller machines. Another team subpoenaed a select list of all the Dodge Magnums in Hillsborough County, almost 500 cars. Then they compared the bank records and the list of Magnum owners, looking for a name that matched.
And the unique thing when you looked at both lists is that one name jumped out at you is Robert Joe Long. He had a money transaction from the money teller machine, early morning hours. He also was a registered owner of a Dodge Magnum.
In addition, earlier that day, a task force team from Tampa spotted a red Dodge Magnum on Nebraska Avenue, the killer's hunting ground. The detectives stopped the car. They told the driver they were looking for a robbery suspect. From his license, they identified him as Robert Joe Long. They photographed him and wrote up a field report. He was cooperative, but wouldn't let them search his car.
Of course, they contacted the task force headquarters when they made the stop, and we told them go ahead and stay with it at that particular time, stay with the car once it left, and we put a surveillance team together then to stay on him.
At that time, a photo pack was assembled, a lineup of photographs, in which he was placed in that photo pack. That photo pack was shown or displayed to Lisa. She looked at it and said, "That's the guy that kidnapped me." She pointed out Bobby Joe Long.
Lieutenant Terry had his man, but he couldn't risk making a mistake with a quick arrest. He needed time to obtain warrants and organize his team. To ensure public safety, Terry ordered non-stop surveillance of Long. Units followed Long's every move in unmarked cars. Maybe he sensed they were on his trail because he started cleaning house. Officers cleaned up right behind him. Even when he vacuumed his car, police seized the vacuum. They retrieved everything Long thought he was destroying. After months of tracking a phantom killer, the task force was not about to let him slip away. Less than 24 hours after Lisa McVeigh identified Bobby Joe Long, the arrest plan was firmly in place. The task force moved in. They had followed Long to a movie theater.
I'm right over here, Stewie.
As he watched the film, undercover detectives watched him. Long seemed unaware he was surrounded.
We're sitting at the war room we had constructed down at the operations center, and everything is just going 90 miles an hour. We have a surveillance team on the inside of the theater watching it. There's a surveillance team outside watching the car. And that nagging doubt comes to you. Is this really the guy you've been chasing for 8 months? Is this really the guy that has been killing these women? So we tell the surveillance team outside, listen, whatever you do, get up to his car. I don't care if you have to low crawl, whatever you have to do, get to the car and tell us what kind of tires are on the car. And the surveillance team came back and said, hey, there's Goodyear Viva tires on the car. They're all Blackwall. And he said, there's some oddball tire here named Vig, Vogue, something like that on the car. As soon as he said that, we knew.
When we pulled up and saw the car, saw the tire, the Vogue tire that had been described from one of our tire impressions, when we saw the seat that revolved, that laid back, the red carpet fiber, there wasn't a doubt in our mind that we had the right suspect.
Terry gave the order to arrest. Detectives followed Long as he left the theater. He was never out of their sight. They didn't know if he was armed, so as he approached his car, they jumped him and brought him to the ground. He didn't resist.
He was on the ground when I walked up to him and placed my badge next to his face and identified myself as a deputy sheriff, advising him he was under arrest.
They took Long's car to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's office garage. Steve Cribb immediately tore out a piece of carpeting and rushed it to an FBI fiber expert flown in from Washington.
Statement from you? All right.
Meanwhile, Randy Latimer and members of the task force interviewed Bobby Joe Long, who had declined his right to an attorney.
I heard when they arrested you out on the street that you got some cuts and stuff on your hands and arms. Did they take care of all that for you?
Oh, yeah, just a couple scrapes.
Okay. You thirsty?
They were well prepared, having consulted the behavioral science unit at the FBI Academy on how to conduct the interview.
Detective Price?
Just where do you want to start?
The game plan was to start by addressing only Lisa McVeigh. Long confessed immediately.
Well, I went down there and parked my car.
After he admitted to the rape and abduction of Lisa McVeigh, we talked about why he let her go, and what went through his mind and what went on, I rolled into questioning him about prostitutes. Have you ever picked up any prostitutes? He told me he had in Miami. I asked him about here, and he said, well, he might have.
Then they began talking to him about the murders. He initially denied it, committing any of the murders.
As the interview continued, the FBI fiber expert examined the carpet from Long's car. He compared this sample to the others. It was the moment of truth.
As soon as they put them on the comparison microscope, the FBI agent called back and said, bingo, it's a match. The carpet fiber from the car matches the carpet fiber from the different homicide scenes.
It's probably helping me out at this point.
Excuse me.
Terry told Latimer the news. Then Latimer explained it to Long.
I mean, we just got information.
He told him about the fibers and their significance, and about Long's brown head hair found at the crime scene, and the Vogue tire. Latimer let Long know that by the time they found the second body, they were already on his trail.
What can I say?
The evidence was overwhelming.
And he looked down, he had his legs kind of, his knees spread apart, and he looked down between his feet. And I said, yeah, I did it. I said, did what? He says, I killed him. You killed who? He says, I killed all those girls. All those girls in the paper I killed. And then we just started going through them one by one after that.
But then it just became more and more, you know.
Long described each murder in a taped confession. The interview lasted 5.5 hours.
Bobby Long showed no emotion, no remorse. It was just an everyday conversation like you and I are having here. At the end, I don't remember if it was myself or Bob Price that asked him why he did it. And he said that was his secret and he was going to take it to the grave with him.
During the interview, Long also confessed to a 9th murder.
You can go right or you can go left. Go left.
When detectives found her remains, they also found more of the tiny red carpet fibers. The victim was identified through dental records as 21-year-old Vicki Elliott, a waitress. Long also helped identify his 6th victim, whose body had been found on Halloween. 22-year-old Kimberly Hops was known by the street name of Sugar. She was last seen by her boyfriend getting into a maroon Chrysler Cordoba, probably Long's red Dodge Magnum.
I'd like to thank the members of the press corps.
Late that night, Lieutenant Terry called a press conference.
The multi-agency task force has for months been investigating a probable serial killer.
The media thought police would announce yet another body.
County, Pasco County.
They were shocked by the arrest.
How long have you had this suspect? Bobby Joe Long, and he's presently been charged with 10 homicides that have occurred over the course of the past 6 months within Hillsborough County, Pasco County, and the city of Tampa. He was arrested without incident and has subsequently confessed to several of the homicides under investigation.
Do you have evidence for all the homicides?
Yes, sir.
Open 5.
In the coming days, Hillsborough detectives learned they weren't the only ones tracking Long. Task Force member Charles Troy, a Pasco County detective, stumbled upon the truth. He realized that Long fit the description of a man who had raped a Pasco woman months ago. Troy scoured Long's apartment for evidence. He found a photo album filled with photographs of nude women, including the rape victim. In jail, Long confessed and bragged about the crime. Detectives had also found clothing and jewelry from Long's other victims. It's a common quirk of serial killers to keep photos or other trophies of those they kill. Detectives soon realized that Long was the classified ad rapist, named for his M.O. He canvassed the classifieds for women selling beds and other furniture, and when they let him in, he brutally raped them. He had never been apprehended. Long may have raped more than 50 Florida women in the 1970s and 80s, some even during his murder spree. Now with Long finally in jail, detectives reflected on lessons learned.
It just shows the importance of physical and trace evidence, shows the importance of the cooperation with the laboratory and what they can do for you, and the effort that you have to put at a crime scene. The hours you need to spend there, you can't rush. You just have to be deliberate, take your time, and be professional in what you're doing. Because oftentimes the answer is sitting right there in front of you. And the smallest speck, the smallest little piece of information may be the one key that breaks this case.
As detectives got ready for the Thanksgiving weekend, they thought the horrifying 8-month string of killings was finally behind them. They packed up the boxes of evidence and hoped some semblance of normalcy would finally return. But even then, a quiet holiday seemed to evade them. On Thanksgiving Thursday, a couple out walking found a skull, bones, and some clothes, as well as 3 pieces of rope, including a leash-type ligature.
But what he really enjoyed was the pain, the torture, and the torment, and the control he exercised over these victims. You can see that in the early crime scenes with the leader, the leash-like attached to their neck, where he choked them out of consciousness. Then the victim wakes up, and he's still there astride her, raping her, torturing her. That's where Mr. Long got his enjoyment, his kicks. Killing, just eliminate a witness. He could do that without any compunction, without any trouble at all.
When a forensic dentist linked the body to a missing persons report, Long confessed. The victim was Artisan Wick, an 18-year-old bride-to-be who had vanished from a northeast Tampa street corner on March 28th. She had been missing for 8 months. Ironically, Wick was the first victim taken, though the last one found. She brought the known death toll to 10, but Terry has always believed there were more.
I'm confident he's killed other women, other people. Are we going to find those bodies or discover those other cases? I don't know that we ever will.
Bobby Joe Long was never convicted in the classified ad rapes, in part because the statute of limitations had expired by the time he was caught. He did receive 6 life sentences and 693 years for attacks on women in 1984 and 85. For the Hillsborough murders and the rape of Lisa McVeigh, Long received 33 life sentences. He was sentenced to death for the killings of Virginia Johnson and Michelle Sims. After sentencing, Long left the courthouse whistling a tune.
Mr. Long is a killing machine. He became very proficient at what he was doing, very skillful at it. And if Mr. Long ever sees the light of day, all you're going to have to do is follow the trail of his other bodies, of his other victims, because he will kill again. He enjoyed it.
Long remains on Florida's death row, with no date set for his execution. One World Trade Center, New York City. Friday, February 26, 1993. The basement garage was a scene of utter destruction, cloaked in thickening smoke. A woman alone, trapped and bleeding, called police. There were many panicked calls to the NYPD that day as real life took on the trappings of a disaster movie.
Terrorist bombings are what happen in other countries, not here in the United States. And yet, in 1993, it happened in New York City. The World Trade Center bombing rattled our notion of domestic security. It shook the foundation of our belief that we're not vulnerable to terrorism. The cracks it caused in our self-confidence can never be repaired. If it happened once, could it happen again? It was the question in everyone's mind, but no one dared to say it aloud. I'm Jim Kellstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Somewhere in a crater, 5 stories deep, in wreckage a block wide, lay the key to the bomber's identity. At least, that's what investigators hoped.
At 12:18 p.m. on February 26, 1993, panic and confusion gripped the 110-story World Trade Center Tower 1. People were trapped in elevators. Lights went out. Smoke turned the hallways black. Thousands of the injured and panicked occupants choked as they tried blindly to escape what seemed like a nightmare. The engineer who designed the towers anticipated several potential disasters. He structurally designed them to withstand the violence of a sustained hurricane and something as unimaginable as the impact of a fully fueled jet.
Let's go!
It seemed that something had been overlooked, but no one knew what. On that day, Tower 1 became the city's tallest chimney. The stairwells acted as flues, drawing smoke up from the basement, blackening every floor. In the first chaotic hours, all officials knew for sure was that the cause of the problem was in the basement garage. Neil Herman, supervisor of the Joint Terrorist Task Force at the FBI's New York office, was just blocks away from the Trade Center. Unaware of the cause of the mayhem, the FBI took it upon themselves to respond.
Initially, we felt, and we were told, that it was possibly a fire or transformer. Within a few minutes, it became apparent from the traffic on the police channels that there was something there more than just a fire or some kind of an accident. And I dispatched, along with myself, members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force down to the World Trade Center.
The immediate concern was getting the trapped victims out of the building. Extensive damage created logistical problems for rescue workers. Many of those inside struggled to make their own way to safety. The elevators had broken down, and those on the top floor had to walk down 110 flights. There were tremendous injuries due to smoke inhalation. As hundreds of emergency personnel continued their rescue efforts, FBI agents dispatched to the Trade Center were scouring the area for any indication of what may have caused the devastation. The destruction was massive. The city streets around the complex were buckling. The Vista Hotel, which rests between the two towers, had sustained tremendous amounts of damage. It was immediately apparent to investigators that whatever occurred below the street level was powerful enough to come up through 4 levels of the parking garage, up to the street and higher. Special Agent Chuck Stern of the FBI's counterterrorism branch began the process of organizing the investigation.
It started to look like it might be an explosion, a criminal explosion. I would say maybe within an hour of the blast. And then, of course, more and more information kept coming back. You know, we had our special agent bomb technicians from the FBI were down there and, you know, working with the bomb squad from the city police department, and you know, they were reaching the same conclusion that, you know, this is what it appeared to be.
By early that evening, 200 agents and lab personnel from the explosives unit at FBI headquarters were flown in to assist the hundreds of ATF and NYPD bomb squad technicians already at the scene. Locating survivors and getting them out was the only concern. The rescue effort was largely focused in the garage area. As they slowly made their way through the wreckage, rescue workers were shocked and relieved to find survivors. As they moved onward, they reached an area that had sustained massive destruction. FBI, ATF, and NYPD bomb technicians had suited up in protective gear to aid in the search. Some carried thermal imaging cameras to scan for bodies trapped in the rubble. The discoveries became more gruesome. 6 people had been found dead. Among the dead was John DiGiovanni, a dental supply salesman who had parked his car in the underground lot. Robert Kirkpatrick, William Mako, Stephen Knapp, and Monica Smith were also killed. They'd worked for a company that provided maintenance to the World Trade Center. Monica was pregnant with her first child. Wilfredo Mercado, an employee last seen unloading a van in the garage, was found dead, buried under 12 feet of concrete. Inside the garage was an apocalyptic scene. Debris and concrete were scattered 100 yards in all directions. Hundreds of cars had been demolished, and small fires erupted from spilled gasoline. Pumps drained a flood of water and sewage from broken pipes. Overhead, 6 tons of concrete clung to warped rebars. Fiber optic cables dangled. To FBI agents, there was no way that the cause of this damage was accidental. Special Agent Chris Ronay from the FBI Laboratories Explosives Unit surveyed the damage.
Well, as we analyzed the damage to the building, even in the early stages, it was clear that there was a very large bomb, a very large explosive device of some hundreds of pounds. It was clear from the beginning. We didn't know how big it was. Placed in the basement on one of the parking garage levels, most likely in a vehicle.
If the agent's initial conclusions were correct, this was the single greatest act of terrorism on American soil at that time. The morning after the explosion, interagency teams prepared for their first extended glimpse of the destruction. In addition to the ongoing search for victims, they were now looking for any clue that could explain the explosion. But they were explicitly instructed not to move any evidence. The structural integrity of the lower levels was severely weakened. Any disturbance might cause what little support there was remaining to collapse on those inside. The floor of the B2 level of the garage had collapsed, sending hundreds of cars from 3 parking levels down several stories. All the vehicles came to rest at the bottom level, crushing the tower's refrigeration room.
Actually, the engineers told us that debris that was piled around the columns, sort of like a soda straw stuck into a pile of sand. And you couldn't remove the debris because that would remove what little support was present and that was holding the Vista Hotel up.
Construction crews spent hours reinforcing the walls and columns in the parking levels so that agents and investigators could safely explore the scene. After several hours, agents and technicians began to make their way into the blast area.
It was very, very eerie because it was deserted and there were a lot of cars with the trunks blown open and things like that. And some of them you could hear ticking because which was kind of an eerie thing at a bomb site, because the turn signals had been activated and were actually still flashing on some of the cars.
Gradually, the searchers got closer to the origin of the blast, known as Ground Zero. The damage was so extensive that there was no conclusive evidence that pointed to the cause of the explosion. The floors were completely blown away, leaving a 5-story crater which extended through the cavity of the building. Investigators searching for explosive residues had difficulty finding them. They were mixed in with concrete debris and building materials. They had to sift through tons of dirt and rubble in the hope of finding some scrap of evidence. Hundreds of damaged vehicles were swabbed and vacuumed in search of residues. Agents persisted. Somewhere in the devastation were answers. As the images of the World Trade Center bombing were broadcast around the nation, people reacted with horror and disbelief. America's innocence had been shattered. The United States joined the list of countries hardened by terrorist attacks. Desperate to catch the bombers, the city placed a bounty on their heads, $200,000, the largest in city history. By Saturday morning, the FBI had set up a command post specifically for this investigation. Every available agent was assigned to the case. They had received hundreds of leads. Most were callers who described suspicious neighbors. Numerous groups had phoned in to claim responsibility. Though most of these leads appeared to be dead ends, they all had to be pursued. Just 2 days after the blast, as agents chased down leads, investigators processing the crime scene spotted a piece of charred, twisted steel at what was thought to be the center of the explosion. It was part of a vehicle decimated by the blast. Perhaps from the vehicle that delivered the bomb.
VIN number here.
Investigators noticed a series of digits stamped onto the metal debris. Though they were explicitly instructed not to remove evidence, they felt their finding was significant enough to override protocol. The metal debris was loaded onto a stretcher and hoisted up to the top of the crater. Once it was on the surface, agents rushed the finding to a forensics laboratory set up by the NYPD crime lab. In the lab, agents and examiners were having difficulty determining what the markings meant. An investigator from the FBI's Joint Autocrime Task Force was called to examine the debris.
I think it's 729.
His analysis would provide the first major break of the investigation. He called Special Agent Stern immediately.
He says, "Chuck, I looked at this and I said to the person who was showing it to me, my man, you don't know what you have here. This is a confidential vehicle identification number."
Confidential VIN numbers are as unique to a particular automobile as fingerprints are to a person. The hidden number allows law enforcement to determine if a particular vehicle has been stolen. It also gives investigators detailed information about the vehicle, including who owns the car. Within 15 minutes, investigators were able to enter the confidential number into the National Crime Information Center computer, which lists all vehicles that have been reported stolen. A response quickly came back. The number belonged to a Ford Econoline van that had been reported stolen from DIB Leasing in Jersey City, New Jersey. The FBI's Newark office was contacted immediately. Within minutes, agents arrived at DIB. The FBI was prepared to uncover everyone or anything that had access to that van.
That this Ford Econoline van was, in fact, a Ryder rental van that had been rented by an individual by the name of Mohammed Salame. and then later reported stolen. And they learned from the management of DIB Leasing that Salome had put down a $400 deposit on the van, and that he had been anxiously trying to get the deposit back.
After conferring with federal prosecutors late into the evening on Wednesday, the decision was made to have an undercover FBI agent in place at DIB when Salome returned for his deposit the next morning. They spent the remainder of the evening piecing together Salome's history. They learned that Mohammed Salome was a 25-year-old immigrant of Palestinian descent. He had come to the attention of authorities as a vocal supporter of Muslim fundamentalist El Said Nosser, whose scathing opposition to the Israeli, Egyptian, and United States governments was no secret. The undercover agent was posing as a rider representative, stating to Salome that he needed more information about the theft of the van before refunding the deposit. After some discussion, Salome walked out with the $400. As he stepped out of the office, dozens of FBI agents who had been monitoring their discussion descended upon Salome. Less than 1 week after the bombing, the FBI had a suspect in custody. Salome said little to the agents who questioned him about the bombing. They knew it was probable that he had not acted alone. The investigation was taking on a clearer focus. When Salome was arrested, agents recovered various personal items, including his wallet, which contained several business cards and telephone numbers. They began by searching the address listed on his driver's license. A former roommate told agents that Salome no longer lived at that address. However, they were able to find some belongings of Salome's that he had left behind. There were news clippings and photos relating to Nosser, and a photo of him and Nosser together. There were numerous bank records. There were also more names and numbers for investigators to pursue.
We were able to obtain addresses. We were able to obtain telephone numbers. We were able to have pen registers where we were able to monitor phone calls, calls coming in and going out. And once that started, again, it opened up the floodgates.
Investigators were also receiving help from the public. A few days after Salome's arrest, the manager of the space station storage facility in Jersey City called the FBI. Individuals who rented Unit 4344 had received several deliveries from chemical companies just prior to the Trade Center blast. The manager ordered a key and opened the unit. Inside, he found what he thought to be bomb-making paraphernalia. FBI agents would reach the same conclusion. Inside, investigators found several compounds which could be used for making explosives. Their findings were sent to the FBI lab for analysis. There were also many other leads that emerged from the search of the storage facility. Receipts for the chemicals, bank and phone records, and an unexpected bonus, a log of the suspect's comings and goings. To enter the facility, each tenant was required to punch in their special access code on a keypad located at the entrance. Each time a tenant punched in his number, it was recorded in a computer system. Agents could determine each time Unit 4344 was accessed. Meanwhile, police assembled a lineup. Doug Melvin, manager of the space station, identified Mohammed Salome as the man who rented the locker. He recognized him easily because Salome frequently visited his storage locker. In Melvin's experience, customers usually had no reason to do that. Continuing to search for any possible lead, agents obtained phone records from a payphone just outside the storage facility. One name on the list of individuals who received calls from that phone was already familiar to the FBI. That name was Nidal Ayad. Nidal Ayad's name first appeared on a business card found inside Salome's wallet. Ayad worked as a chemical engineer. Within a week of Salome's arrest, agents learned Ayad had called a chemical company inquiring about buying chemicals. The prospect of another bomb was frighteningly real. It appeared that another act of violence was in the making. Agents felt they had sufficient information to obtain a warrant for Ayad's arrest. On March 10th, the FBI raided his home in New Jersey as he and his family ate dinner. After searching his home, agents quickly made their way to his place of business, Allied Chemical. There they confiscated phone records and bank statements that could tie him to Salome. The most irrefutable link between Ayad and the bomb plot, however, came from Ayad's business computer. It was seized and then thoroughly examined.
Our technical people were able to restore an erased file, which turned out to be a letter claiming credit for the World Trade Center bombing on behalf of an organization known as the Liberation Army 5th Battalion.
A similar letter had been sent to the New York Times 4 days after the explosion. In it, the group called the bombing an act of terrorism to protest American support for Israel. There was also a second letter Ayad hadn't had time to send. It promised another blast. Though the investigation was progressing very quickly, each new discovery revealed the existence of a large and ongoing conspiracy. The potential for more attacks grew more likely every day. As the FBI tried to learn more from their prime suspects in the World Trade Center bombing, Salome and Ayad continued to stonewall their efforts. Analysis of all the confiscated phone records led investigators to an apartment in Jersey City. The landlord who owned the apartment at 40 Pamrapo Avenue confirmed that Salome and another individual rented the apartment from early January of 1993 until the end of February, just 2 months later. The landlord could not confirm the identity of Salome's roommate, whose name he knew only as Rashid. Most likely, that name was an alias. A search warrant was quickly issued. After executing the warrant, agents discovered that 40 Pamrapo Avenue was the bomb factory, the place where the conspirators mixed an explosive powerful enough to rock the World Trade Center. Inside the apartment and an adjacent garage, FBI forensic examiners recovered traces of a diverse range of chemicals. These items were collected and then rushed to the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. While agents searched the apartment, the identity of Salome's mysterious roommate emerged. They found papers requesting political asylum in the name of Ramzi Youssef, who, according to the documents, had been detained in September of 1992 at Kennedy Airport for entering the country without a visa. The Pamrapo Avenue apartment was a gold mine for the FBI.
All right, let's go. Go ahead and tell us what happened.
Before they learned of the apartment, the FBI's laboratory examiners could only speculate from residue samples taken at the Trade Center that the bomb used was comprised of the highly explosive compound urea nitrate. The discovery of the bomb factory at Pamrapo Avenue, however, made them certain. From the labs at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., Special Agent Ronay reported the findings.
From the analyses in the laboratory, we concluded that it was made with urea nitrate, a homemade explosive mixture. There's no such commercial product. So they had to mix this themselves. And when we finally located the storehouse or workshop where they did make the bomb, this was confirmed. These materials or remnants of them were available and confirmed that this is what we were indeed seeing in the laboratory in these residues.
Witness interviews and phone record analysis continued, directed mainly at the locations where key elements of the conspiracy had taken place. All of those interviewed mentioned seeing a distinctive-looking individual in the company of Salome and Ramzi Yosef. Phone records helped to identify that individual as Mahmoud Abu Halima. As agents focused their investigation on Abu Halima, they learned that shortly after the bombing, he had fled the country. Abu Halima was well known to authorities through his association with El Said Nosser. Abu Halima was also close to the radical Muslim cleric Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, who would later be sentenced to life in prison for a conspiracy to bomb several New York City landmarks. Soon after agents learned that Abu Halima had fled the country, Egyptian authorities contacted the FBI to say that he'd been arrested and detained in Cairo. Abu Halima had been wanted there for conspiring against Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Negotiations between the United States and Egyptian governments were successful. Agents flew to Egypt and took Abu Halima into FBI custody. When he was turned over to FBI agents, his hands were cuffed and his head was entirely covered. He told the FBI that he thought he was being taken out to be shot. Relieved to now be in their custody, he spoke to agents on the flight back to New York.
He did make several statements that were used against him at trial. One of the key things that he said was, about Rashid, who was later determined to be an alias used by Ramzi Yosef.
Abu Halima told Stern that he and Yosef had met in Afghanistan at a secret camp for the Mujahideen Muslim Freedom Fighters, a training ground for international terrorists. At every step of the investigation, Ramzi Yosef's name appeared. He was a known international terrorist and an expert with explosives. Agents now believed he was the mastermind behind the World Trade Center bombing. The FBI began searching for Yosef. They soon learned that he fled the country the night of the Trade Center bombing. An international manhunt for Ramzi Yosef had begun. In the meantime, agents were trying to determine how and when Yosef came to the United States. It's been said that the day Ramzi Yosef arrived on American soil was the day terrorism came to America. On September 1st, 1992, the shadowy Afghan-trained master bomb maker arrived at New York's Kennedy Airport. The FBI's close scrutiny of the passenger manifest from Yosef's flight that day revealed another clue. He had not entered the country alone in September of 1992. With him was Ahmad Ajaj. But Ajaj had been detained by customs agents for producing a false Swedish passport. In Ajaj's suitcase, customs agents found a library of manuals on bomb making and guerrilla warfare. The suitcase was confiscated, and Ajaj was arrested and jailed for passport fraud. To the FBI, Ajaj appeared to be an unlikely conspirator. He had been incarcerated from September of 1992 through the bombing of the Trade Center in February of 1993. Fortunately for agents, prison policy required that all phone conversations be recorded. Ajaj had unwittingly left a trail, and agents quickly followed it.
And we began to see that he was, through various methods, predominantly through three-way calling, where he would call another individual, and then that individual would forward the calls. He was staying in contact with the other conspirators and was in fact trying to assist them in completing their mission of building this bomb.
Hajjaj was questioned by FBI agents about his contacts and his knowledge of the bombing. He said little. His silence was not enough to prevent FBI agents from arresting and charging him in connection with the bombing. With 4 conspirators now in custody, authorities decided to bring them to trial while the search for other bombers continued. In September of 1993, 6 months after the bombing of the World Trade Center, Salome, Ayad, Abu Halima, and Hajjaj appeared in federal court in New York City.
By the time that the trial started in September of 1993, we really had to have 2 investigations in one. We had to have an investigation basically continuing to identify those responsible, locate those that were also charged that were fugitives, and also prepare for a 6-month trial that ultimately ended in March of 1994.
By this time, examiners had processed numerous crime scenes. The World Trade Center, the storage facility, and the bomb factory. 70% of the van that delivered the bomb had been collected. There was also a mass of receipts, phone records, and interviews. Tons of evidence had been recovered. It would now be up to a jury to determine if it was enough. By September of 1993, 6 months after the bombing, federal prosecutors were ready to present to a jury how the defendants carried out the bombing of the World Trade Center. The conspiracy began soon after Ramzi Youssef arrived in America in September of 1992. He moved in with Salome, and the two became close friends. The friendship was founded on a mutual hatred of Israel and a desire to disrupt U.S. support of the Israeli government. They chose the World Trade Center as the stage for articulating their political agenda. The World Trade Towers are the city's tallest buildings, rising a quarter-mile above the pavement. In addition to the 2 towers, the complex includes the Vista Hotel, numerous underground shopping areas, and entrances to the subway lines that connect New York and New Jersey. Below that are 5 parking levels, each level containing more offices and businesses. The terrorists decided the bomb could cause the most damage, claim the most lives, by being placed in the garage. The plan was put into effect. Receipts showed that in November, Youssef used an alias to buy chemicals. Throughout the winter, he would order more as he honed the formula for his bomb and worked out the plan of attack.
Where are the exits?
The chemicals were delivered to space station storage. Salome or Youssef would sign for them, using aliases to make sure that no paper trail could lead to them. Youssef was desperate for the bomb-making manuals and Hajjaj's confiscated luggage. Youssef developed a clever 3-way calling system to hide the trail from Hajjaj's prison phone in New York City to his New Jersey apartment. First, Youssef called a burger stand in Dallas, Texas, where his friend Iyad Ishmael worked. Then Ishmael called Hajjaj as Youssef waited on the other line.
Get them here. No. Look.
When Hajjaj answered the phone in prison, Ishmael connected him with Youssef.
Hajjaj, how are you doing?
Together, the 3 were able to discuss the bomb's construction.
I don't have the plans.
The jury was methodically being shown the lengths to which the bombers had gone to protect themselves. These bombers would not be deterred. The prosecutors continued. One winter afternoon, the bombers' plot stalled. Salome and Youssef were driving back from Abu Halima's New Jersey home when Salome lost control of his car. He suffered only minor injuries. Yosef was more seriously hurt. He was hospitalized for a week. Yosef made calls to chemical companies from his hospital bed. The FBI learned who he called and when through hospital phone records. As Yosef recuperated, Salome, Ayad, and Abu Halima drove deep into the Pennsylvania woods. Here they tested a prototype of their deadly mixture. It exploded, but it needed more power. So in the coming days, Ayad would attempt to buy compressed hydrogen gas. Hydrogen is so commonly used in Middle Eastern terrorist bombings that it's considered a signature. Even though Ayad worked as a chemical engineer, he had problems finding a company that would sell it to him. On February 16th, the chemist Ayad rented a car to scout the World Trade Center. Salome's fingerprints on the wheel revealed that he drove. His prints were also on the parking ticket for the garage's B2 level. A sketch found later showed Ayad had made a rough drawing of the floor plan. Then, just 4 days before the bombing, at Yosef's request, Iyad Ishmael arrived in New York from Dallas to help complete the bomb making. Ishmael would also drive the vehicle carrying the bomb into the garage. He was Yosef's trusted friend, and he had been a New York City cab driver. Perfect credentials for this delicate operation. On February 23rd, Salome went to DIB Leasing and rented a 10-foot Ford Econoline panel van. He left a cash deposit of $400. Construction of the bomb was nearly complete. There was one more reconnaissance visit to the World Trade Center garage. In a burgundy Chevy Corsica rented by Ayad, with Salome listed as the second driver, the conspirators returned to the garage with Yosef and Ishmael to determine the precise location for placing the bomb. Jurors were shown another garage claim ticket that confirmed the time of the visit, the make of the car, and the garage level they parked on, the B2 level. Meanwhile, Ayad had managed to reach a firm that would sell him compressed hydrogen. He ordered 3 large tanks, which were delivered to the space station storage the next day. On February 25th at the Pamrapo apartment, Abu Halima and the others carefully mixed sulfuric and nitric acid with glycerin into the deadly and volatile substance nitroglycerin. They mixed an estimated 1,200 pounds of urea crystals with several gallons of nitric acid. They poured it into big metal drums where it formed a gel-like mass. They transferred the urea nitrate mass into plastic trash cans. The others had backed the van down the driveway behind the house and up to the apartment door. They packed the cargo hold with their creation, a lethal cocktail of chemicals, bonding agent, fuse, and detonator. They loaded the trash cans and then arranged the home-brewed nitroglycerin among them. They had threaded 4 long fuses through surgical tubing to reduce the smoke and slow the burn enough for the bombers to escape. The fuses were rigged to blasting caps and boxes of gunpowder, and then inserted into each of the nitro containers. All that was missing was the hydrogen, which was used to make the blast even more devastating. In the Ryder van, followed by Ayad's Corsica, they drove to the space station to pick up the hydrogen. They loaded it carefully in the van, propping the 3 red tanks behind the boxes of nitro against the rear doors. Yosef and Ishmael drove the van from New Jersey to a hotel in Manhattan. Hotel records showed that Ishmael had reserved a room for the night on February 25th. They parked it out back for the night, hidden from view. At 10 that evening, from his home in Jersey City, Salome informed New Jersey police that the van had been stolen. He spun a story about parking it at a grocery store and coming out to find it gone. Later that night, he met with police to document the loss. He knew he would need a valid police report if he was going to get his deposit back. Agents learned that Salome had purchased a child's airline ticket abroad because it was all he could afford. He needed the van deposit back so he could upgrade the ticket to an adult fare. With the vehicle having been reported stolen, everything was in place. The bombers took their last drive to the World Trade Center. At about 2 minutes past noon the next day, Friday, February 26, 1993, the bombers' Ryder van pulled into the B-2 level ramp of the World Trade Center. The burgundy Corsica followed. Ishmael drove the van as Yosef sat in the passenger seat. They pulled the van into a space normally occupied by a New York Port Authority van. Since Port Authority owns the World Trade Center, their vehicles have easy access in and out of the garage. The getaway car waited nearby. One of the men held a cigarette lighter against the fuse. As it began to burn, they rushed to the Corsica and pulled away. The flames raced along, an inch every 2.5 seconds, silent and almost smoke-free because of the surgical tubing. The gunpowder was packed into Atlas Rockmaster blasting caps, the kind used in the demolition of large building sites. 4 fuses were used to guarantee the bomb would detonate. Yosef, Ishmael, and the others exited the garage a few seconds before the blast. At 12:18 p.m., the months of planning this destruction was about to become a reality. The explosion hit the wall of the tower with a massive force, destroying everything around it. Later that day, as rescue workers and investigators were still responding to the scene, Yosef sat safely aboard an airplane to Pakistan, and Ishmael aboard a plane to Jordan. Within days, Abu Halima had also fled. If investigators had not found and tracked the VIN number so quickly, Salome would likely have escaped too. Over the course of the 6-month trial, the jury heard from 206 witnesses and reviewed a total of 10,000 pages of testimony. In February of 1994, a year after the bombing, the trial concluded. It took the jury just 3 days to reach a verdict. The jury forewoman read off 38 pronouncements of guilty: conspiracy, explosive destruction of property, interstate transportation of explosives, and murder. When she finished, the courtroom erupted. Ayad and Salome leapt up, screaming the verdict was an injustice. Only Abu Halima had remained silent. He sat calmly, arms folded, with a bemused smile on his face. 3 months after their convictions, on May 24, 1994, Judge Kevin Duffy sentenced each bomber to a year in prison for each year of life he had deprived the victims. It came to 240 years apiece, with no possibility of parole. Sentencing went on for hours, with each defendant making a lengthy speech. Mohammed Salome, the chemist Nidal Ayad, Ahmed Ajaj, the man who brought the bomb manuals into the country, and Mahmoud Abu Halima, known as the Red, will spend the rest of their lives in prison. Though the trial of the 4 defendants was a success, the mastermind Ramzi Youssef and his accomplice Iyad Ishmael were still fugitives. 4 of the 6 conspirators in the World Trade Center bombing had been convicted. But the FBI still sought the mastermind of the bombing. As the search for Ramzi Youssef and his accomplice Iyad Ishmael continued, agents learned that Youssef was involved in several terrorist plots designed to bring down commercial airliners worldwide. Advisories were issued to American travelers abroad. More terrorist attacks on Americans or American interests were likely following the verdict. Youssef was one of the most dangerous and elusive men in the world.
Subsequent to the World Trade Center incident, it's obvious and apparent that he was planning additional acts of terrorism around the world. The air conspiracy case certainly reveals that the extent of what was being planned, the fact that he was moving around throughout the world, several countries, indicates a wide range of support that he and his compatriots had.
It was not until February of 1995, 2 years after the Trade Center bomb went off, that Ramzi Youssef was apprehended in Pakistan and turned over to FBI agents. Agent Stern was sent to retrieve Youssef and bring him back. Youssef was suddenly willing to talk. His hatred for the United States and its aid to Israel was all-consuming. He told Stern that the World Trade Center was chosen as his target because it was the greatest symbol of American finance and imperialism.
He felt that it was kind of like a state of war. He compared it to the United States atomic attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where he said 250,000 people were killed, and he felt that if he could topple one of the towers into the other, he would kill that many people, and it was a similar type act.
The final arrest came 6 months later, in June of 1995. Iyad Ishmael was discovered and apprehended in Jordan. He too was returned to the United States to stand trial for his role in the bombing. Youssef and Ishmael were tried together in New York City. In January of 1998, after being found guilty of the same 38 charges that the other defendants had faced, a judge sentenced the two to life in prison with no possibility of parole. The judge, calling Youssef an apostle of evil, ruled that Youssef should serve the remainder of his life in solitary confinement. Only a life of solitude could prevent Youssef from conspiring to kill again. With the major conspirators imprisoned for life, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have had a chance to reflect on the magnitude of this investigation.
Well, the World Trade Center case really in many ways was a real wake-up call for law enforcement. It was the largest single act of international terrorism in the country. And although terrorism has been here for many years, certainly on the scope that we saw the World Trade Center was something that was unique and certainly much more horrific than we've seen in the past.
The bombers did $550 million worth of destruction to the World Trade Center. The financial damage caused by the disruption of national and international business was also deeply felt. America had been jolted from its belief that international terrorist attacks don't happen on American soil. By bringing such a complex and far-reaching conspiracy to a close so quickly, the FBI sent a message around the world. The taking of innocent lives will never be tolerated.